Good evening, everybody. Well, thanks for joining.
We are trying to figure out if we can measure the earthquakes, the electrical signals of earthquakes, and by monitoring the RF frequencies of the digital broadcast bands of the 80 meter, 40 meters, 30 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, and 10-meter band. And it seems like we're picking up some really interesting stuff at the same time.
And I have been working on upgrading the RF viewer. And what the RF viewer is doing is it takes the data that is collected by the RF Seismograph, and it matches it up to different agencies like the USGS. So we get the USGS earthquake data and query it from their database and display it on the our seismograph. What additional new update will do is actually will allow you to query the Whisper database. So whenever there is a Whisper communication happening in real time, you will actually be able to see that with the new viewer.
The Whisper system is currently run by universities in the U.S. And it was in Joe Taylor was the person who came up with it. His call sign is K1JT for Joe Taylor, and Hamsai is also involved. And they have been coming up a really interesting system where you have an audio software that creates a sort of a whistle. That's why it's called Whisper, and the whistle is transport is created through the speaker, and the speaker can be connected to the microphone input of the radio, shortwave radio that is, and it will broadcast. It takes up to 2 minutes to have one signal, to have one broadcast finished, and there is information encoded while it sends the system, and it's decoded by the receiver, and it's amazing with how few and how little of wattage you need to cover a lot of distances. There's a sort of a world record that one of the stations on the East Coast was able to connect to a station in Australia by using only 10 milliwatts. That's a really, really low power to get across the ocean. And it also shows how it's all connected together. And it's a really interesting system. And I hope they're going to keep it on the air for a long time, because we want to be able to use that in our viewer, and be able, when there is earthquakes, we want to be able to show how the passes of the shortwave radio propagation changes as big earthquakes erupt. And in order to do that, we have our RF seismograph, which monitors 6 bands, and they monitor the frequencies that are listed in the Whisper, and it seems to work quite well, because we're picking up some interesting stuff. Can you go to the next slide? All right. So here's our second part of the equation. It's the USGS that we're talking about, and they do have a quick database, and it's amazing what they can see with their seismographs. They go down to 0.1 0.1 Richter scale, which is a really small event, and it's all monitored and listed in their database, and you can actually write a little software that allows you to query that database, and that's what we've done as part of the RF viewer. we made it include the USGS database. So this is where our data comes from all the events of earthquakes. And so that what's mainly monitored is seismic events, quakes and volcanoes, and they actually label the events, and it's quite interesting. They also have military explosions, atomic tests, and other mostly classified stuff that we're not supposed to know about. But it's quite interesting that you can pick up that they can pick up military explosions and atomic tests, and it's quite obvious that you will pick it up because those things are like huge seismic events, especially when you come to atomic bombs. And as I mentioned before, the smallest event is zero point 0.1 M0.1, and it's a worldwide network that monitors all the quakes events, except that from Canada, which the Canada database is separate, and that was called by Earthquakes Canada, and we're looking into connecting the RF viewer to also query for these Canadian events, but we haven't implemented that yet. So if you want to play with the database, there's a link in the bottom that allows you to query a specific date. So if you click that, if you put that link in your browser and you change the dates, the start time and the end time, you can get any data. You can get any day you want from the USGS database. And I don't know exactly how far it goes back, but they have a lot of data, and it's very, very consistent. And that what makes the USGS database a really neat way for getting these kind of seismic events. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so here we go to the next thing that we have that's going to affect propagation, and it's the solar alerts from NOAA, and they're not as well organized as as the USGS databases. It's more like HTML, yeah, reports and JSON text files, which are not really databases, and they're sort of searchable, but they're not as easy to implement as the databases that the USGS and that Whisper provides. But nevertheless, it's very important information because if there is a solar storm or a solar event, we definitely know that it will black out the data, black out our radio propagation, and it's sure interesting to know how earthquakes and solar events interact with each other, and we try to document that by our daily reports. So the history that goes back on the NOAA solar alerts is the furthest back that I could find was 2015, and if there's a link below, you can find out. Yeah, with a link below, you can find out all this information, and you can query all the databases. All the information is recorded, and we can use it to write our papers if we want to find out anything about solar events. It's right there. Next page. Okay, so here is another one that kind of came about the power outage that we had in Green Valley. There was a scheduled power outage that was scheduled on the 18th of July 2022, and I was kind of not really expecting anything from this. I just said, okay, well, the data is going to change, but it didn't think that it was going to change this much. So we were just refurbishing our battery backup system, and so we were testing that out at the same time, and it worked quite well. And while we had the 2 hours of outage, uh, amazingly, all the noise level dropped to pristine levels. Like you go into the interior of British Columbia in some remote areas, that's the kind of noise level that you would expect it. I had for 2 hours, and when you look at the propagation on 20 meters, you can see that the noise level drops, but the propagation itself didn't change. So you know that the RF seismograph wasn't impeded by the power line. It just adds noise to it, but propagation still occurs, and that's kind of where it is where the RF seismograph in Lynn Valley provides interesting information because we're connected. It's like you can't separate radio propagation from the electrical field that the power lines create. You have to live with that, and it's not something we want or we can change. But this is actually Lynn Valley. In this case, is actually quite a good location. Look, considering that some places that we measure down on the coast, they get these noise storms that are created by rising clouds, and you get nothing for days. You have nothing but noise on the radio. And so Lynn Valley, even though we have a power line, it's still a great place to do shortwave radio. And when when the power came back on, you can see like all the noise comes back almost immediately. So there's a very strong connection between the power line and my radio antenna, which is close to the power lines. And I guess this is everybody else's a problem too, that they're all connected together. We can't separate power lines from our shortwave radio listening. It's all connected, and this just shows how difficult it is to have no noise created by electrical supply of power. Okay, next line, please. So here is something that we thought was kind of interesting, and it actually was the gamma ray burst that was recorded by Dr. Klikoich in Tasmania, if I only say that right. And it was he has an Earth probe antenna, and he was able to measure for a very short period, like I think about 2 minutes or 3 minute time of the Earth's current changed while the gamma ray burst hit Earth, and this was interesting enough. So I was talking to people from the astronomy at the Penticton, and they looked at their data and they couldn't find anything either. So we didn't find anything in particular that would be telling us that we received that. So the thing is that it was recorded on the south side of the planet. So maybe the the gamma ray burst only hit the south side of the planet, and we got kind of left out, and we did not see it. But interesting enough, there was a 6.2 earthquake that was triggered in the mid-Atlantic 4 hours later. So could that electric current flow increase? Could that have triggered the earthquake the 6.2 earthquake that happened 4 hours later? Well, we don't know for sure, but it's sure interesting how these things line up. And if you want to find out the full story about this gamma ray burst, you can go to www.spaceweather.com, and you have to go to the archive, go back to October 19th, and that was when it was when it was shown on their website, and they had a really good cover story, and I really recommend you read that one. Go next slide, please. Okay, and now when you have political issues in science, it's really bad. Like we cannot detect earthquakes via shortwave radio because there is such a big uproar on the consequences of that. Like the way the ionosphere is affected by movement of energy movements in the ground, and how it creates fault lines that are radiating, and these fault lines have a huge problem. Like you go to Salt Lake City, you go to Los Angeles, you go to San Francisco. It's a huge problem. Like we have built our high rises on top of fault lines, and you see a picture there. This is in Florida, where this one house collapsed on one side because of a fault line, and we would look at our building sites and look at the fault lines before we built. We would actually be able to save billions and billions of dollars and not put ourselves at risk during earthquakes. Like we've built schools on top of fault lines, and at the same time we have schools are our safe places. So if there is an earthquake, it's supposed to go to the school, and it's built to withstand the earthquakes. But if it's on a fault line, the possibility that it's gonna receive more energy than the structure can handle is most likely the case. So there is just a huge disconnect between what we should build and where we should build, and how much money we spend on trying to recuperate and the expenses that are created by these buildings that are built on fault lines. Like this is not just a small event. Like it's universities, it's sports, it's event buildings, schools, casinos, big manufacturing plant, large construction corporations, and it goes on. The list never ends. It's like an amazing misrepresentation, it's misguided. Like we want to build on the cheapest site, and the cheapest site is not going to be the site that's going to give us long durability. We want to be able to build on areas, or we should be building in areas where we have proper ground and no faults, that provides the protection we need in earthquake zones. And we're not doing that. It's crazy. NASA was supposed to have a competition about how to detect these fault lines, and this is nothing new. With a LiDAR detector, we can detect these fault lines. We can detect the radiation, and it's crazy. It's crazy. Like Donald Trump found out about this competition, and he shut it down because he built his golf courses and casinos on fault lines, and it's crazy. It's just I don't know. I just I don't know where to take this, but it's really sad that we don't want to build on proper grounds, that we have to build on bad ground, and it always backfires. Like Trump has the buildings that Trump has a casino that had to be blown up because it was too poorly built on a bad site. And thank goodness nobody died there, but somebody died in Florida when you look at that building, and it's a shame. It doesn't have to happen that way. And if we just be a little bit more aware about where we build, we could avoid a lot of things. And especially if you live on the West Coast, we have a lot of earthquakes, small earthquakes, and you don't need a large earthquake to cause destruction on fault lines. And if they don't keep it up, the destruction of the foundation will continue, and and it will weaken the foundation to a point that one day you have a big earthquake and there's no earthquake safety. So we're kind of in a really bad situation. Anyway, next slide. Okay, so here's how you install the RF viewer on your operating system. For Windows, it's really easy. So what you have to do is you have to download and install a Java runtime for your PC from java.com, and then you take the link below and you click on MDSRXE. It does a run install, and you put it on your desktop, and you can click on the RF viewer.jar, and that will launch the software. So, and if the software is running, you click on Get Remote Data button, and if you connect to the internet, you will down and display the current RF seismograph data. And if you want to get the new updates that we've been working on, please contact me and send me an email, and I will send you a new link. And we have always new updates because we're currently working on a big revision of the RF viewer, and it has a lot of capabilities that the old software didn't have. Next slide. Okay, if you want to run it on a Mac, it does also run on a Mac. At the same time, you have to download java.com. You have java.com for Mac, and install it on your system. And then once you have set the jar files to be opened by, you have to set up the jar files to be opened by the Java API software that just was installed. And you can download our tar file and compress them, place them in a folder of the desktop, and sure enough, you can double click the RF Seismograph viewer.jar, and it will launch our program. And again, if you're interested in getting updates, we can get you the latest version. Just email me. Next slide, please. Okay, in here it's how we're gonna install the RF viewer on Linux, and it's not very complicated. You just have to follow these steps. So it's basically cleans and updates your current existing installation. you get and then at the bottom you install the OpenJDK 8 JRE and also the JDK 8 JDK. And once that's installed, you can verify that they work properly, and by typing in the commands below. And once that's completed, you download the latest version from our group, the wiki. There's also a wiki that explains it better. And then here you download from our repository and install it. So it's very simple. Like you make an MDSR SA directory. You type in you download the tar file, and then you uncompress the tar file. You make the MDSR SA viewer jar executable, and then just run the command $Java RF viewer jar, and you will be able to see the RF viewer on your desktop. There's also a desktop shortcut that can be copied from the directory, and that if you put that on the desktop, you can start you can start the RF viewer by double clicking it. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what the RF viewer, the RF seismograph antenna looks like. It's a vertical antenna, of course, because you want to be omnidirectional, and it's resonant to the 6 frequencies that we monitor, and it allows us to pick up earthquakes around the world. The interesting part about where I'm located is I'm close to a fault line that's actually quite has quite a lot of radiation, and the radiation I can actually measure with a radiation meter. So I have a EMF 390 from GQ. That seems to do the trick. What you need to get is you can probably use any EMF meter as long as you have a very low frequency. That it go down to lower than 1 hertz, preferably 0 hertz for the detection frequencies, and it works quite well. The antenna though is 12 meters tall, and it's been up there for years, and I'm really happy with it. The only thing is when you run your radio 24/7, you definitely want to have a grounding balloon and a lightning protector. What the grounding balloon does is important, because the grounding balloon grounds the antenna. So if there's static buildup, it goes straight to ground, so you don't get static discharges on your monitoring. And also, if there is a lightning strike, the balloon will shorten the lightning strike to ground, and the lightning protector will also help protect the receiver from overvoltage by discharging the excess electricity and currents energy into the ground system. And the grounding balloon is actually quite interesting, because we put the grounding balloon. I ran the RF seismograph for years. It's just a lightning protector, but when I put the grounding balloon in there, I got 12 dB of extra noise floor. So it's definitely worth to put in the effort to get the grounding balloon. The instruction on how to build one is on our group, and if you want to build one, and I can give you a link how to get it started. It's not hard to build. It just have to have the right core, and it's definitely worth to do that on any receiving antenna, because you don't now I don't get static discharges. Next slide, please. Okay, here is a picture of what the RF seismograph uh, looks like. So it's use a TS590 receiver, which is a very neat receiver, and it's quite an impressive piece of engineering, and I'm still impressed. It's probably one of the best receivers that I've used so far, and the receiver uses 10.7 megahertz IF. So we have to have a lift that's specially configured so they can detect the 10 points. You can modify, down convert the 10.7 megahertz IF to 12 kilohertz IF that goes into the sound card of the Raspberry Pi. We can run on an Raspberry 3 or 4, and what you also need is an additional sound card, which provides a 16-bit interface at 48 kilohertz. And yeah, and the analog power supply, it's designed to minimize any other interference. So if you have a switching power supply, there might be some additional noise that we want to get rid of. And of course, we have a backup battery that we run, and it will give us 4 hours of runtime. The network is provided via Cat5. You can see the yellow little cable there, and that's important because we don't want to run Wi-Fi, because that might interfere with the measurements. And the radio is connected via USB via RS232 to the RF seismograph, and this provides a cat control via USB, and the software that's controlling the rig is FL rig, and FL rig is instructed to change frequencies by the RF seismograph, and it changes frequencies every 7 seconds for every channel, so that makes up a repeat rate of about 52 seconds per measurement, and that is important because it's below 1 minute, and what that does, it creates a sort of a delayed effect, because the monitor signals are going on and off at the minutes. Every minute it goes off and on, so we want to be able to be off and on just a little bit faster, so we can see the changes. So that means that because we're running about 10 seconds faster than the minute, so if you run 10 cycles, in 10 cycles we're on the uneven section of the part of this transmission, and in another 10 minutes we're on the even set of the transmissions, and it rolls through that way. And in this way we can monitor not only the the weak signals, but we also can monitor both sides of the conversation, and not just get one radio station. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is what the RF seismograph looks like in working order. So it's basically a Raspberry Pi 3 or 4. 3 is better because you don't need the cooling. So if you want to put it somewhere where you don't want to worry about a fan and heat, and dust for a long time, you want to use the 3, and you can make it work on the 3 and on the 4. And this is a 4. It's a bit faster. It gives you real-time spectrum analyzer capability. That's part of the RF seismograph. And it works faster, but it's not really necessary. So the gray box that's where the down converter is. So the IF from the radio comes in, and that gets converted to 12, 15 kilohertz IF, which is then decoded by the sound card and then turned into a digital audio signal. And this is very, very simple, but you can the better your receiver is that you connect to this RF seismograph, the more you will see. And so it's also, like, you also need a good antenna. So it's not just the RF seismograph that makes this thing work. It's the antenna, it's the receiver, it's how you set up your ground, how you provide lightning protection, and there's a whole bunch of things that over time have to work together and to get you the best signals. And it's not something you can. It's not something that we can just pull out of the box and put it together. It's something that is very specific for each location, as I seem to discover. And we hope to have more of these seismographs. There's one person in Kelowna that is interested, and we're going to be able to talk to get something set up maybe in the early of next year, and sure looking forward to that. Anyway, next slide, please. Okay, so here is a article about what we really think how the Earth is actually changed by solar events and by its magnetic field. And this is also changing the way earthquakes are detected, because Earth is a lot more electromagnetic and a lot more electric that we want to think of. Like, we have this idea as ham radio operators that ground is ground, but when you're a geologist or when you look at the events that occur on this planet, ground is not ground. There is quite a lot of variances. And the interesting part of that is that when you're on fault lines, your radio propagation changes. So that's why when you do peaks on the air, you always go in a mountain where you have the fault lines. So if you find the right location on a peak of the air, you can make amazing contacts with very little power, because there's a gap in the ionosphere, and it provides you the access into the ionosphere. And then once you're up in the ionosphere, the signal can distribute around the world very easily. So it's just that first D layer that you have to get across, and the electromagnetic radiation that the fault lines put out weaken the D layer, and that also provides the access to your signals. So it makes a lot of sense to do peak on the air, parks on the air, because a lot of parks are very close to fault lines. And once we have a sort of an understanding of where the fault lines are, it's amazing how much it changed where you operate your radios. And can I have next slide, please? Oh, I thought that I had in there. No, I didn't have that. Okay, so we're already at the end. But what I wanted to say, there's a slide that I did, and it's not included here. Probably it's part of the and it shows the site that we usually use for our field day, and we discovered that there's actually a fault line going through that site, and so we went up there and measured with our uh, reader, and we weren't quite able to detect anything. But when we put our antennas up, the reports that I got from the radio operators that were operating during field pass saying that we had a lot more contacts and we had were able to make a lot more radio times. We were so there's something to it, but we need to be a little bit open and look for these fault lines and set up where these faults are, because you might be surprised what kind of radio communication you can get. So there's the references. So there's USGS archive. So if you want to check out their archive, just go to their website. It's amazing what kind of information they provide. There's the NOAA website, radio communication, and if you want to find out how the JSON data that the data storage explained, how you figure that out, it's not hard. It's just a searchable text document, and it's kind of it works, but it's not very fast. And when you go to Whisper, we want to check out Whisper. They have an amazing history. It started at 2007, and it's all their data is online, and it's amazing that we can have access to that. And there's another reference about the Earth probe antenna. So if you want to set up an Earth probe antenna, there you go. It's a lot of drilling, but it's nevertheless interesting. Can we have next slide, please? Okay, and so here are the references to. So if you want to find out precursors to earthquakes, so there is a physics.org document that explains quite well how that all works out, and the physics works out and it's there. We just need to see it, and it's amazing. Like the people always say that our extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence, but here is the evidence. It's right in front of our eyes, and we're not allowed to see it. There's an article from Scientific American. It was 2018, earthquakes in the sky, and again, a very good article for somebody that's not an expert in electromagnetic systems of the ground, but it makes you understand that there's a lot more electricity in our ground than we give it credit to. And if we start to understand this behavior of our ground, I will build our houses on better locations, and it will probably be saving a lot of lives over the long time. Just yesterday, I saw the horrible movie documentation about the Fukuyama earthquake, and the people that died there. It's awful, and the people that died, actually, it's sad that people died, but the people that really suffering are the ones that are left behind, because they have to think about it every day. and they miss their people. And it doesn't have to be this way. It's just really sad that we don't look at the evidence and connect the dots. Anyway, if you want to monitor earthquake activity, Earthquake Canada is a place to do that. And there's an interesting earthquake that just happened a couple of days ago, and it's at the fracking site of the in northwestern BC, and there was an M4.6 earthquake that was registered right at the when we were having celebrating Remembrance Day, and it's amazing that nobody that was supposed to have inform people that there was an earthquake and there's a potential of flooding from the dams that could collapse. In this case, there's nothing. It's just amazing. They just don't seem to want to connect the dots. And of course, the geological survey, and you download their data. It's amazing what they have. Like everything is classified and documented. It's very well documented, and USGS is amazing. So, if you want to get involved with the RF Seismograph, download and install the RF Seismograph for Linux and the Raspberry Pi. Download the viewer. That gives you information. We also have a way to that you can look at history events that we recorded, and we have data going back to 2016. And we're always interested in people have an open mind and looking at the data and make their own conclusions, and maybe one day we can make the connections. Anyway, that's it. Well, hope everybody has a real awakening after seeing us, and let's work together. We can do it better. Thank you very much.